The mountains of Afghanistan had a way of swallowing sound. Even when war raged in the valleys, silence seemed to cling to the ridges, heavy and watchful, as if the earth itself judged the battles fought upon it. That morning, the silence was broken not by war, but by the crunch of boots on gravel as a Navy SEAL unit moved with precision along a narrow canyon trail. Their mission was simple in theory: push through the valley, secure intelligence from a downed surveillance drone, and extract before enemy forces could converge. Among them moved Lieutenant Sarah Blake, her face hidden behind a scarf pulled high against the dust. To most, she was just another soldier folded into the ranks, her pack heavy but her stride measured. She blended easily, not drawing attention to herself, never the loudest voice or the first to step forward. Yet under the surface, she carried a skill honed by years of relentless training, a skill no one in this unit had yet seen her use. The canyon narrowed as the team advanced, shadows stretching long across the sand. It was too quiet. The team leader, Commander Harris, raised his fist, halting the squad. Radios crackled faintly, broken by static, and then went dead. Harris cursed under his breath. The silence wasn't natural. They were being watched. The ambush came with thunder. Machine gun fire erupted from the ridges above, sending rock shards flying. Insurgents poured out of hidden alcoves, their rifles sparking with muzzle flashes. The SEALs scattered to cover, returning fire in disciplined bursts, but the high ground belonged to the enemy. Grenades rolled down into the canyon, blasting dust clouds that blinded and disoriented. The SEALs were cut off, pinned from every angle. "Back routes gone," one shouted over the gunfire, his voice edged with panic. Another tried his radio again, only to shake his head. "No comms, nothing." "We're boxed in!" Commander Harris assessed quickly, but the picture was grim. Ammunition was limited. The enemy force was larger than expected. Extraction was impossible without clearing the ridges, and no one had a shot from below. For the first time, the elite SEAL team felt the creeping edge of despair. Sarah lay prone behind a boulder, scanning the chaos. The sounds of battle pounded against her chest, the staccato of AK-47s, the sharp ping of bullets striking stone, the cries of her comrades scrambling for survival. She had been here before, in Fallujah, years ago, when a sniper's bullet had taken her spotter and left her frozen, unsure if she could ever pick up the rifle again. That day had etched a scar deeper than flesh. She had survived, but the question of whether she was good enough had followed her ever since. Now, as she watched her team being overwhelmed, she felt the same doubt clawing at her. But alongside it came something else. The memory of every long night spent perfecting her aim, every grueling hour on the range. Every lesson passed down from the legends who had come before, Chris Kyle, Carlos Hathcock, men whose names echoed in the halls of history because they refused to falter when it mattered most. Her voice cut through the gunfire, calm and steady. "I can get them." Harris turned, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "What? I can cover us." "Long range. I've done this before." There was no time to argue. Trust was all they had left. Harris nodded once. "Do it!" Sarah dropped her pack and unzipped it, revealing the custom M2010 sniper rifle she had carried without fanfare. The weapon was sleek, deadly, fitted with a high-powered scope tuned for this exact terrain. She assembled it quickly, hands moving with the ease of countless repetitions. Bullets cracked overhead, but her focus narrowed until the chaos seemed far away. She slid prone against the ridge, adjusted the bipod, and peered through the scope. The world shrank to a circle of glass, dust swirling, enemies shifting, muzzle flashes sparking like brief stars. She slowed her breathing, heart sinking to the crosshairs. Wind speed, distance, elevation. Her mind calculated every factor in silence. The first shot broke like thunder. A machine gunner, perched high and raining fire on the SEALs, toppled backward, his weapon falling silent. The shift was immediate. The SEALs surged forward, firing harder, their spirits jolted by the sudden reprieve. She adjusted, tracked, fired again. Another fighter fell, then another. Each pull of the trigger carved a new opening, a sliver of hope where none had existed moments before. The ridge became her domain, every hostile silhouette a target she erased with precision. From below, The SEALs glanced up between bursts of return fire, astonished. "It's her! It's all her!" one shouted, all mixing with adrenaline. Doubt began to dissolve into belief. The enemy, realizing their advantage was slipping, tried to shift their strategy. A squad scrambled up the far side of the canyon, attempting to flank the SEALs. Sarah saw them. She adjusted her scope, held her breath, and squeezed. The lead fighter collapsed, blocking the path. Panic rippled through the squad, scattering them back into cover. Minutes stretched into lifetimes. Sarah's world narrowed to trigger and target, to the steady rhythm of exhale and fire. Her rifle spoke for her, clearing nests, silencing threats, buying the SEALs the space they needed to push forward. Every shot was a promise. You are not abandoned, not today. At last, the tide turned. The enemy, broken by relentless precision, began to retreat, dragging their wounded and leaving weapons scattered in the dust. Silence fell over the canyon once more, this time real, heavy, but filled with the breath of survivors. The SEALs gathered at the mouth of the valley, uniforms shredded, faces streaked with sweat and grime. They looked up as Sarah descended the ridge, rifle slung across her shoulder, her face as steady as it had been when the battle began. One operator shook his head, still in disbelief. "You just carved us a way out." Sarah only shrugged, her voice quiet, humble. "Someone had to." The team's relief was palpable. Some laughed nervously, others sat down hard, heads in their hands, alive because of her. Harris clapped her on the shoulder, his eyes fierce with respect. "You didn't just save us. You reminded us what courage looks like. For Sarah, it wasn't about glory. It was about the choice she had made when everything seemed lost, the choice to step forward, to trust her skill, to silence the voice of doubt and act." She thought of her fallen spotter, of the question that had haunted her since that day. Now she knew the answer. She was enough. The motivational takeaway echoed in the stillness, unspoken but clear. Courage isn't loud. It doesn't boast or seek attention. Courage is the quiet decision to act when the world seems to be falling apart. Responsibility isn't waiting for someone else. It's stepping into the fire yourself. Breaking limits means refusing to let doubt dictate your actions. And believing in yourself can carve a path to survival where none seems to exist. The SEALs moved on together, carrying the weight of the mission, but also the gift of life restored. In the silence of the mountains, their footsteps faded. But the story of that day, of the lone sniper on the ridge who turned despair into hope, would live on. And Lieutenant Sarah Blake, once content to blend into the ranks, now walked among them as proof that one person's courage could save them all. The sun dipped low over the jagged ridges of eastern Afghanistan, washing the valley in a dull red haze. It was the kind of light that made the mountains look eternal. But for the Navy SEAL team moving through the ravine, eternity seemed a distant dream. Their mission had been carefully planned. Advance, recover intelligence from a compromised safe house, and extract before local insurgents could react. But in war, plans rarely survive contact with reality. The trail twisted between walls of rock, the kind of terrain where an ambush could materialize in seconds. The SEALs knew it. They moved with weapons raised, scanning every shadow. Still, no amount of preparation could save them when the first burst of gunfire shattered the silence. Rounds tore into the canyon from above. The ridgeline erupted with muzzle flashes as insurgents opened fire from fortified positions. Dust and stone exploded around the SEALs, driving them to their knees. "Cover!" Commander Hayes barked, but there was little to be had. The canyon was a killing zone, and the enemy knew it. Grenades rolled down the slope, detonating in thunderous bursts that rocked the valley. Radios crackled with nothing but static. The SEALs were cut off, trapped, and overwhelmed. Retreat was impossible. Ammunition was running low. It became clear to every man and woman in that canyon, if they failed to break free, capture or death awaited them. Panic edged into the voices of even the most seasoned operators. One shouted, "We're boxed in! No way out!" Another cursed as his last magazine clattered into place. Hayes tried to rally them, but the scale of the attack was undeniable. Their numbers were too few. The enemy had them locked. On the opposite ridge, watching through the haze, was Corporal Emily Carter. She was not SEAL, not part of the mission, at least not officially. A Marine assigned to a nearby forward operating base, she had been shadowing their operation as Overwatch, a precaution the SEALs hadn't even known about. To them, she was just another name on a manifest, another Marine filling the background. But Emily was more than that. She had grown up reading about warriors like Audie Murphy and Sergeant York, men who had stood against impossible odds and carved victory from despair. Their stories had shaped her belief that sometimes one person's courage could mean the difference between life and death for many. And now, staring through binoculars at the SEALs pinned in the canyon, she realized it was her turn to prove it. Her heart pounded as the scale of the crisis unfolded. The SEALs were finished unless someone intervened. She glanced at the weapon beside her, an M249 squad automatic weapon, its belt of 5.56mm rounds draped like a serpent of brass. The saw was heavy, built for suppressive fire, not subtlety. But right now, subtlety was worthless. She swallowed hard, remembering the firefight in Helmand where she'd frozen for a moment too long and a friend hadn't made it out. That failure had haunted her ever since, a voice whispering that she wasn't ready, that she didn't have what it took. The doubt clawed at her again now, but below her the SEALs were fighting for their lives, and she knew she couldn't let that voice control her any longer. She tightened her helmet strap, planted the saw on its bipod, and chambered the first round. The buildup was electric. She checked the belt feed, smoothed the rounds, adjusted her sight line. Dust coated her gloves. Sweat stung her eyes. The wind shifted, carrying the echoes of the firefight into her ears. She steadied her breathing, finger curling against the trigger. Then she opened fire. The roar of the M249 split the valley like a storm. Tracers arced from the ridge, tearing into enemy lines with ferocious bursts. The insurgents faltered, confused by the sudden rain of lead from above. For the first time the SEALs had cover. Emily's fire was relentless. She raked the ridgeline, shredding enemy positions, cutting down machine gunners who had pinned the SEALs. Every burst created space, every impact buying seconds the SEALs desperately needed. Her weapon became a wall of sound and fury, and through it, a path began to form. Below, the SEALs looked up in disbelief. "Where's that coming from?" one shouted, ducking as a grenade fizzled harmlessly against a wall. Hayes saw it clearly. Figures dropping under precise suppressive fire. His eyes widened as he realized someone on the ridge had taken up the fight for them. The SEALs rallied instantly. "Push forward," Hayes ordered. With Emily's cover raining down, they surged toward the gap her fire had opened. Grenades lobbed upward found their marks, while rifles cracked in synchronized bursts. The canyon that had been a tomb moments earlier became a battlefield they could control. Emily's arms shook from the recoil, but she didn't stop. She reloaded belts under fire, her movements sharp and efficient. The saw sang again, muzzle glowing, brass casings tumbling down the rocks. Every shot carried a piece of her will, her refusal to let these men die. The insurgents tried to regroup, but the ridge was no longer theirs. Emily carved it apart, nest by nest, position by position. For every attempt they made to press forward, her bursts drove them back. The SEALs, fueled by the rhythm of her gunfire, cut through the valley like a blade. Minutes stretched into eternity. Smoke filled the air. The ground was littered with the debris of battle. Then, slowly, the enemy broke. First in hesitation, then in retreat, fighters scattered into the mountains, their advantage shattered. Silence fell at last, broken only by the crackle of fire and the panting breaths of survivors. The SEALs regrouped at the canyon mouth, weapons lowered but eyes still wide with disbelief. They had been left behind, abandoned to what should have been certain death. And yet gunfire from the ridge had carved them a way out. Emily descended carefully, saw slung across her chest. Dust streaked her face, sweat matted her hair beneath the helmet. She looked less like a savior than a soldier who had simply done what needed to be done. One SEAL stared at her, shaking his head. "That was you. That was all you?" She gave a small nod. Someone had to hold the line. The words were quiet, humble, but they struck harder than any rifle shot. Around her, Hardened operators, men who had doubted survival only minutes earlier, looked at her with awe. Some clapped her shoulder, others simply muttered thanks, their voices thick with relief. For Emily, it wasn't about recognition. It was about redemption. She had silenced the voice of doubt that had haunted her since Helmand. She had proven, to herself most of all, that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about acting in spite of fear, about standing when others cannot. The SEALs prepared to move, alive because of her. And though the world would never know the details of that valley, every man who walked out carried the story with him. When they were left behind, one Marine's gunfire carved them a path to survival. The motivational truth hung in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Courage is not measured by the scale of the battle, but by the choice to fight it. Responsibility is not passing the burden, but shouldering it, even when it seems impossible. Limits are illusions shattered by belief in one's own strength. And sometimes it takes just one voice, one weapon, one act of determination to turn despair into deliverance. Emily Carter walked on, rifle heavy but heart steady, knowing she had done what history demanded of her. She had answered the call when no one else could. The Afghan mountains had earned their reputation as a graveyard for armies. Their jagged ridges and shadowed valleys were more than geography. They were predators, swallowing men whole when they strayed too far. That morning, as dawn bled into pale light, a Navy SEAL team advanced into one such valley. Their mission was delicate: recover intelligence from an enemy weapons cache and escape before reinforcements arrived. It was supposed to be quick, silent, efficient, the kind of mission SEALs were bred to excel in. The valley was narrow, steep walls looming like watchtowers on either side. The team moved in formation, rifles raised, boots silent on loose gravel. They had been told the area was lightly held. They had been told wrong. The first gunshot rang out from above. Then another. Within seconds, the ridgeline erupted with fire. Enemy fighters poured lead into the canyon, machine guns rattling, RPGs streaking fire down from hidden nests. The SEALs scrambled for cover, pinned by a storm of firepower. "Contact front! Both ridges!" Commander Ellis shouted, returning fire toward the flashes in the stone. The SEALs formed a defensive perimeter, but it was clear within minutes they were trapped. The canyon offered no retreat, no escape. The enemy had planned this well. Radios jammed, one operator growled after slamming his headset against a rock. Ammunition was limited. The numbers were against them. And slowly the reality sank in. They had been left behind. Fear crept through even the hardest among them. "We're cut off," a SEAL muttered, his voice raw. "They'll bury us here." Ellis tried to rally them, but the truth was written in the stone walls around them. Every second brought more fire, more shouts from the enemy, closing in for the kill. And yet, somewhere above, a single figure lay hidden in the rocks. Captain Rachel Donovan, a sharpshooter of the United Kingdom's elite special forces, had been shadowing the operation from a distance. She was not supposed to intervene. Her orders were simple reconnaissance and overwatch. But orders crumble when confronted with the sight of allies about to be slaughtered. Rachel was no stranger to impossible odds. She had studied the legends, Sergeant York at Argonne, Carlos Hathcock in Vietnam, soldiers who had defied numbers and fate with nothing but precision and will. She had carried their lessons through every deployment, their stories etched into her resolve. And as she watched the SEALs pinned in the canyon below, she knew it was her turn to stand where others would falter. She reached for the Barrett .50 caliber rifle resting against the rock beside her. The weapon was massive, nearly 5 feet of steel and purpose, designed not just to kill but to dominate battlefields. Its recoil was brutal, its presence unmistakable. And yet, in Rachel's steady hands, it became an extension of her intent. Her breath slowed as she loaded the first round. The metallic click echoed like a heartbeat. Through the scope, the world shrank into clarity. She saw the machine gun nest hammering fire into the canyon, saw the SEALs pinned behind a crumbling wall, saw death looming close. The buildup was tense, every detail magnified. The weight of the rifle against her shoulder, the shift of wind across the ridge, the taste of dust in her mouth. Her finger curled against the trigger, and the impossible moment arrived. The Barrett roared. The shot cracked like thunder, echoing through the mountains. In the canyon, the machine gunner's body jerked violently before collapsing, weapon silenced. For a heartbeat, the battlefield paused, stunned. Then Rachel fired again. Another nest fell quiet. Below, the seals froze in disbelief. "Where the hell is that coming from?" One shouted over the din. Commander Ellis caught it faster, the distant boom, the collapsing positions. His eyes widened. "Sniper on the ridge." Gunfire from above continued, precise and devastating. Rachel moved with mechanical calm, chambering round after round. Each shot was deliberate, controlled, and final. Enemy fighters scrambled to find cover, but the Barrett tore through walls, rocks, even armored shields. There was nowhere to hide from her reach. The SEALs, emboldened, surged forward. "She's clearing us a path!" Ellis barked, leading his men toward the gap Rachel's fire had carved. For every step they took, her shots struck ahead, dismantling the enemy like a surgeon's scalpel. The enemy, realizing their advantage was slipping, launched a desperate counter. A squad of fighters climbed the far ridge, intent on flanking the sniper. Rachel spotted them through the scope. She adjusted, exhaled, and squeezed. One fell, then another. The squad scattered, their assault broken before it began. Minutes dragged into lifetimes. The canyon rang with the rhythm of her rifle. Boom, reload, boom, each strike a hammer against the enemy's will. The SEALs advanced, grenades clearing pockets of resistance, rifles cracking in synchrony with her thunder above. The ridge that had been their cage now became their salvation. At last, the insurgents broke. The survivors retreated into the mountains, dragging their wounded, their morale shattered by a sniper they could neither see nor silence. The gunfire ebbed. The valley fell into stillness once more, but this time the silence carried relief, not despair. The SEALs regrouped at the canyon mouth, battered but alive. Dust streaked their faces, sweat dripping into their eyes, but disbelief was written across them all. They had been seconds from annihilation. Then gunfire from the ridge had carved them a way out. Rachel descended slowly, Barrett slung across her shoulder. She looked less like a savior than a soldier who had simply done what needed to be done. Her eyes met Ellis's as she reached the group. "That was you," he said. Not a question, but a statement heavy with awe. She gave a small nod, voice steady. "Someone had to," the SEALs murmured their thanks. Some laughed in shaky relief. Others simply stared at her, unable to reconcile the quiet woman before them with the thunder that had just shattered the battlefield. For them, she was no longer an anonymous shadow. She was the reason they still breathed. Rachel didn't bask in the glory. She didn't need to. For her, it wasn't about recognition. It was about duty. She had been in the right place, with the right skill, and had chosen to act when it mattered most. That was enough. As the SEALs prepared to move, carrying their mission forward, a deeper truth lingered in the air. Courage isn't measured by medals or headlines. It's measured by the choices made when no one else can. Responsibility isn't waiting for orders. It's stepping into the breach because lives depend on it. Limits exist only until someone decides to break them, and belief in one's skill can carve a way out of even the most impossible trap. The mountains would remember the battle as just another clash in an endless war. But for the SEALs, it was the day they were left behind, only to be saved by the steady fire of a lone sniper on the ridge. And for Captain Rachel Donovan, it was the day she proved that courage, quiet and uncompromising, could still shape destiny.